Since the beginning of January, we've been looking together at our motto text for this year: for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. And in all this time, I've been trying to show you what Paul says God offers here in this verse. We've looked at it and explored in some detail what the apostle says we are to give if we are to gain. The question I want us to consider today is this: what does it take to change? If it were just a sermon, then you've heard quite enough from me to get started. If it were education, if it were just information, then you've got enough to be able to make the decision. If it were good intention, then the reality is that we'd be there by now, wouldn't we? And if it were concerted effort, many of us would at least have made a dent in this as our goal. But the truth is, it's none of these things, though they all have a significant part to play. The answer to the question, what does it take to change, consists of three things that I want us to think about this morning. The first one is this: it requires a will and a desire to change. What is it that Jesus said to the man at the pool of Bethesda here in our reading? Do you want to be made whole? It may seem like a stupid question, but sadly the truth is that so often we can be comfortable in our status quo. Our identity can be so wrapped up in the way that things are that we fear the change we actually need. We can become so used to this norm that we cannot imagine that anything could ever be any different. The result is, it isn't different. Why? Because God will not impose what we will not embrace. Let me say that again. It's an important point. God will not impose what we are not prepared to embrace. Many years ago now, I had a lady in my congregation who desperately longed for her husband to become a Christian. She was, he wasn't. It caused tension. And so she prayed, and we prayed together, and we looked to see what God would do. And lo and behold, he did become a Christian. About a month or so after he'd done so, she came in and she said, I hope the situation would be better, but it's actually got worse. Now he wants to interfere in that which I've always regarded as my territory and my domain. He wants to give a lead. He wants to grow in his faith. He wants to come to the things that I thought were my own. Sometimes we need to be careful what we pray for, because we might just get it. The problem for the man at the pool is that he didn't want to be well. If he had, he'd have found a way to get into the water, wouldn't he? Maybe those around the pool had become his friends, his support structure. Maybe what he was doing, the destructive habit that had put him in the situation, was so compulsive, so gripped him that he couldn't let go of it, or he didn't really want to. You know, this can happen, can't it? We can get so bound up with our situation, so bound up with those around us, so gripped by the thing that has a hold on us, that we are not able or willing to break free, to change. We fear that if we do, we might lose our friendships. Or it could be that there's a silent conspiracy that takes place that says, don't change, because if you do, you'll make me look bad. And because we love them, we don't make any change, even though we know we want to and that God is suggesting we should. So instead of moving forward, we allow our friends, we allow those around us to hold us back because they don't want to move forward. And I venture to suggest that in certain parts of the church, we have seen just that. We have seen people who are not for changing, not for making any moves. And as a consequence, they've held you back. Maybe this man's identity had become so bound up with his paralysis that he could not manage being any different. Now he was the paralyzed man, and that's how he defined himself. After all, 38 years is a long time to be in one state and one situation. Sometimes the truth is we want the change to be easy. We want it to be handed to us on a plate, and that's rarely the case. and shows real grace when it happens. If this man had really wanted to be whole, wanted to be well, he could have asked those who brought him every day to hang around and drop him in the waters when the waters were troubled. But he hadn't. He could have rolled into the water. He could have got them to put him right at the edge, so all he had to do was drop in. But he didn't do any of these things. What a contrast to the woman with the issue of blood, who was willing to risk everything just to touch the hem of Jesus' garment and believed that just that brush with his presence would bring about total wholeness. Or what about the man lowered down through the roof, who got 4 friends to dabble in a bout of wanton destruction to get him to the feet of Jesus? It was one of those anything goes, whatever it takes attitudes, and this man clearly didn't have that. Little wonder Jesus asks him the question, do you want to be made whole? Here and now, in this moment, he would ask you, do you want to change? Do you want to move on? Do you want to be whole? Do you want to be healed? Do you want to know life and gain? What are you willing to give and do to get it? Second, we need to see that it's worth letting go to lay hold. Do you know, one of the biggest reasons why people don't change is because they cannot see that the change is worth it. The pros of change must outweigh the cons of change if we're going to do anything about it. We need to see the balance tipped in the favour of the new you. Have you ever heard the quote, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose"? It was by the missionary Jim Elliot. That's what he's talking about in that quote. Are we willing to make the change? Can we see the gain that God is offering to us? And have you ever noticed that no one in the gospel stories who ever came and gave Jesus anything ever went away disappointed or empty-handed? In fact, they always received more than they had actually asked for. In our motto text, Paul says, to give your all is to gain his all. And the one solid fact is this: God has more than you do and can always outgive you. The question and the challenge is always the same. Will you? Will you weigh up what God offers against your current situation and take the risk to make the leap? The interesting thing is that even now, those who do always turn around and say to those who haven't yet, it is so worth it. Third, we can't do it alone. It's interesting, isn't it, that there are accounts where people track down Jesus, and there are other accounts like this one where Jesus tracks them down. There's quite a lot of lost sheep about this story, isn't there? In fact, when it comes to advancing in the faith, there always is. Even when on the surface it looks like we made all the moves, it's only later, when we look back, that we realise that it wasn't like that at all. Jesus seeks him out because he is guided to do so by the Holy Spirit. And of all the people he could have healed that day, this was the one the Spirit led him to. This man needs Jesus' help, and he receives it. And in 8 words, Jesus accomplishes what 38 years could not. What did Jesus do? He spoke to the mountain in the man's life. What was it? It was sin. The paralysis, it seems, was merely a symptom. Jesus says to the man in verse 14, "See, you are whole again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." He addressed the situation. He commanded the change. The root cause of the man's inertia, we are told, was sin. We don't know what the sin was or how it led to the paralysis, simply that there was a connection that when broken, set the man free. It seems likely that what we're getting here is the edited highlights of what is certainly a longer conversation where Jesus addressed the issue, offered hope, instilled confidence and faith, and performed the miracle. In fact, it wasn't just one miracle, it was multiple miracles that day. He was released from what had caused his paralysis. He was strengthened. His wasted muscles grew strong. His joints that would have been stiff from inactivity became flexible and supple. His I can't thinking was instantly changed to I can thinking. And he walked. He walked into freedom. He who had not walked for almost 40 years did so instantly. Was it worth it? The answer is so yes. What did he hear in Jesus' voice that made this possible? What did he feel in his body that convinced him that this had happened? We don't know. All we know is that it was enough. It always is. The moment we truly encounter Christ, things change, and always for the better. It starts on the inside, and it works its way out. The fascinating thing is, he didn't even know it was Jesus, but that didn't change the transformation taking place. Now here's the thing. If Jesus could do it for him, he can do it for you. When? Now. Where? Here. What holds you back? What is it in your internal world that causes you dis-ease? Is there a root cause to your situation that needs addressing first? Do you want wholeness and freedom? As I was preparing this message, I had this strong sense that there was someone here today that God would do the same for now. All you have to do is show a little glimmer of will and desire to change, to feel a little flutter in your heart that is God speaking to you and saying, this is your moment. Do you have a longing? Are you open? Because if you are, he will sweep in by his Spirit and do wonders for you and in you. We're going to pray. We're going to pray in a different way. I want you to take a moment to turn off your video feed so that no one can see you and see what you do. Because actually the truth is, this is no one's business but your own. I want you to close your eyes once you've done that. I want you to see Jesus standing before you. He has sought you out. I want you to see your paralysis, that which has held you back, maybe for many years. I want you to hear his words. What would he say to you? Do you want to be whole? I want you to offer to him your sin. And I want you to say, yes. Let's pause for a moment. Let's see what he will do for you by his Spirit. Amen. When you're ready, let me invite you to turn on your video again, because we're going to sing together. But you may want to pause and wait and allow God to do what he started in you.